Friday, Jerry turned 87. Everybody say happy birthday. I hope you all live at least that long and have such a great smile. You know, it's possible to be absolutely convinced about something and yet be absolutely wrong. I have this little app on my phone, and I can look at it and I can tell the price of the gas everywhere around me. So I can find the best price on gas. Or so I thought. It turns out that the best price on gas is not always the least expensive gas. A friend of mine recently had an opportunity to drive from here to Indiana, and his car has one of those little meters on it that actually tells you the miles per gallon that you're getting at the moment, so you don't even have to use a calculator. And so he experimented with lots of different brands of gas and lots of different grades of gas, and he discovered for his car the best mileage didn't come from the cheapest fuel, and it didn't come from the cheapest grade. He actually got more miles, more value for paying more at certain stations than others. So kind of thwarted my application in some senses. Now I have to look for specific stations. But that's true about life as well. This morning I want to tell you about three individuals that are part of the Easter story in the broader sense that were radically mistaken about their lives. And they're all found in the 27th and 28th chapters of Matthew. And I'm actually not going to read their accounts. I'm just going to tell you about them. You can turn there if you want, or you can just listen. You'll be familiar with them. The first individual's name was Jesus. Not the Jesus that you think I'm talking about, a different Jesus. Because actually there are two Jesuses in the Easter story. The first one is, of course, Jesus the Christ. The second one is a man whose name is Jesus Barabbas. And as Jesus was the Son of God, Barabbas means son of Papa or son of a man. So here you have the Son of God and the Son of Man. At the crucifixion of Jesus, Barabbas was a condemned criminal. He was what was considered a rebel, a radical, an insurrectionist. He had planned to overthrow the government and in fact had killed people in the process of that, probably Romans, and was caught, was pronounced guilty, and was due to be executed very quickly. There was a tradition that the Romans had allowed the Jews to have on Passover every year. They were allowed to free one convict. And so this year, Barabbas' name was up, and he probably was pretty excited to find out his name was up. But then suddenly there was this other Jesus that was in the mix as well. Barabbas, I don't know a lot about Barabbas, and so I suppose in some ways I'm kind of reading between the lines, but I imagine Barabbas as somebody who thinks that he's doing the right thing. He, in fact, is becoming the hand of God and overthrowing these wicked Romans from his land. He is doing what he imagined God wants him to do. He is doing what he thinks is best for his country. He thinks that what he is doing is what he should be doing. And yet he finds himself on the verge of being executed for those very things that he thought were right. The reality is that he deserved to die, and yet he got his life. And in a very real sense, that's the picture that every one of us are in this morning. Because in reality, we are the ones that deserve the cross, not Christ. We think of ourselves as probably good people that have a right to live. We live in a country and a society that tells us all about all the rights that we have, all the freedoms that we have. In fact, but the Bible in fact says that the only thing that we have a right to is to die. Because the Bible says that the wages of our rebellion, our turning away from God, the wages, the justice that should happen to us because of our response to our Creator is death. Not just physical death, but eternal death. So we find ourselves in the same exact position as Barnabas, that we deserve the cross, but in fact Jesus took our place on that cross. The next individual is a man whose name is Simeon, and he's from Cyrene. Cyrene is actually in Africa, and we have no idea. He could be Egyptian, he could be African. We also know there was a Jewish settlement there, so he could have been a Jew. But he's not at home. He's a long ways from home, and he's in Jerusalem for the Passover. He may have been there for religious reasons. Maybe he just liked to travel. Maybe he just wanted to see the sights. Maybe he'd never been to Jerusalem and wanted to be there. He was just looking to enjoy life. That's what life was all about for him. It was just like an adventure. That's what he wanted. He wanted to get the most out of life. And suddenly he finds himself on the edge of a crowd, jerked out of the crowd by the Romans and forced to carry this cross. It wasn't his cross. Why did he have to endure this? Some of you have gone through extremely difficult trials in your life. Some of you have trials ahead of you. And the natural response is to say, what did I do to deserve this? Why should my life be difficult? But Jesus says to us that if we give the difficulties of our life to him, that he turns them into our advantage. And he said, the burden of life that seems so heavy for you, and actually will turn out to be the very thing which makes your life rich, which adds value, which adds meaning to your life. I don't imagine that Simeon, as he walked along that road carrying that heavy cross, had those feelings. And as Jesus was nailed to that cross, I don't imagine he felt like it had anything at all to do with him. But in fact, the fact that Jesus was nailed to that cross enabled all of those difficulties in life that we endure to have some value, to have some meaning. The third person I want to talk to you about, his name is I forgot his first name. The rich man from Arimathea. Joseph, thank you. We don't really know who Joseph is. He may have been that rich man that Jesus encountered earlier. You remember the story where Jesus encountered this rich man and Jesus asked him if he'd fulfilled the commandments, and he said, yeah, I fulfilled every single one of them. And he said, well, then go sell all that you have and come and follow me. And he said he turned and went away, a very sad person. It makes sense that that would have been Joseph, because we know here that he was a religious leader, a religious ruler, probably a member of the Sanhedrin. And yet he was also very wealthy, and it wasn't his religion that was keeping him from God, it was his wealth. And for many people, I think it's prosperity that does keep them from really experiencing God in a deep and meaningful way. People imagine that wealth, that money, will be the very vehicle that will enable them to enjoy life. And even people that have grown up in the church, that have lived, have read the Bible their whole life, still imagine that somehow winning the lottery or somehow encountering a huge inheritance or having them give them a huge gift will be the very thing that will suddenly make them happy. I think that Joseph struggled with that. In fact, it says that if he is that same man, that he went away sad. And here we find Joseph, who's had been a follower of Jesus, but his faith had come to an end. He had no faith that Christ was going to rise again, and the reason that I believe that is because he put him in a tomb. If he thought he was going to rise again, he would have taken him home and put him in his bed, sat around and waited. But he thought his hopes and dreams were over. And often it is the very death of our dream that puts us on the path to ultimately discovering what our dream is all about and what God's dream is for us. Do you know, everything that you are, everything that you know about life is located in your brain. You can take virtually every other part of your body and disconnect it, and as long as you provide blood and oxygen to the brain, you will still exist. One of the challenging things about people in a coma is that we really have no idea what's going on in there. We can see some waves happening, but we have no idea if life is still there or not. Because the essence of who you are is in that little several-pound mass. And the only way that that brain of yours has any idea as to the reality of its existence is through your senses. What it hears, what it sees, what it smells, and what it tastes. It is inputting all those things, and it is creating this idea of what the world is. But you know, that idea actually may be completely distorted. None of you may even be real. I might be just imagining you all. What seems blue to me may not, in fact, be blue to you. We have no way of knowing if we see colors the same, if we see textures the same. We have no way of knowing if the sounds that I hear are exactly the same as the sounds that you hear. We imagine they are, but we have no way of knowing. Because they are waves that our brain is interpreting. Light, sound, touch, those are all impulses that our brain has interpreted in its own unique way. I tell you this because when we were created, there was another sense that every one of us had. It was the sense of God. And the Bible tells us that when we rebel against God, when humans rebel against God, and ultimately all of us are born into this sense of rebellion, that other sense is severed. I was singing that song this morning where it says, you asked me how I know he lives within my heart. And I believe in the importance of the historical account of the resurrection, and I believe that our faith is based on that. But I also believe that if that was completely eliminated, if somebody could come and completely prove that Jesus never existed, I still would have faith because I know that I have a connection in my mind to something which is greater than me. I sense that being's presence. I sense him in my heart. I hear him at times specifically talk to me. And I want to tell you that the reason that that's possible is because of the resurrection. Before the resurrection, it was basically hopeless for people to have that connection to God. But Jesus said, I have come that you may have that connection. I have come that you may have life. I have come that you may sense that I am your creator. I have come that you may sense the Spirit of God, which in fact is that connection. That you may experience that. That is our privilege because Jesus Christ rose from the dead. The Bible tells us that when he rose from the dead, death was defeated. And that, I believe, is exactly what the Scriptures is talking about. That shriveled, broken connection was defeated. And once again, you have the opportunity to find life through that eternal, wonderful connection. Scientists actually have found that. They've actually done studies, researched, and found that part of the brain that makes that connection. And I can direct you to that study if you're curious about it. The people that did the study were not religious in any way. Some of them actually became religious after the study as they began to realize, because they were really curious what was happening when people prayed. And they discovered this entirely new area of the brain was lighting up. Nothing else stimulated except prayer and this intimate relationship with God. And I want to tell you this morning, some of you may not have that connection. For some of you, it may be so faint that you rarely ever hear it. Maybe some of you, the only time you hear it is when you come on Easter morning or on Christmas. And I'm really happy that you have that faint connection. But I just want to tell you that every single one of you can have that connection in a greater sense. It is that very connection that enables you to discover who you truly are. It's that very connection that Jesus said will give you the ability to enjoy life in a way that you will not be able to enjoy it. You'll realize that money is nothing compared to that connection. You'll realize all of your adventures, all of your things that you want to happen in your life are nothing compared to that amazing connection. It will literally influence everything else in your life to the positive. I've come that you may have life and have it to the full, to the richest, the way you were intended. And yet we're so fearful to make that relationship grow and to stimulate it and allow it to blossom, to make it central part of our life. This morning, as you think about the resurrection, I want you to think about that. Some of us in our lives at different times have been entirely wrong about what it means to be a Christ follower. But I want to tell you this morning that that's what it's about. It isn't about rules. It's not about regulations. It's not about being forced to go or do anything. It is about that connection to God. The reason we gather is because in the presence of each other, we learn how to strengthen that, to cause that connection to grow and to be enriched. to bring value to our lives and enable us to be everything God created us to be. That, my friends, is the hope of the resurrection. I want you to meditate on that as we sing together this last hymn.